When everybody gets ready, so I don't want to rush everybody. Manassas Therapy Dogs exist today because God does work in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. And this is one of his mysterious ways that this came about. Therapy dogs, psychiatric help for a dog? What's wrong with your dog that he needs to be taken to a shrink? Never heard of such a thing. Better to spend some money on than taking a dog to a shrink. And explain that the dog does not mean my dog is psychotic and in need of seeing a shrink was repeated many times. My therapy dog is helping others who are in a hospital or nursing home. This was met with skepticism about this explanation, and they said they just didn't understand that. So in Florida, where I began therapy dog work, our dogs were welcomed with smiles and open arms, and my expectation that Manassas would be the same way. And I was very wrong. Very few people had even heard of a program where strangers took their dog, trained and tested, to visit a medical facility. It turned out that any dog that they had heard had been in a hospital room or in a nursing home had been sneaked in by one of the members of the family. And most people I met said dogs belong outside, not even in the house. So it was a different environment at that point in Manassas than it is today. Dilly and I began visits in Manassas at Annenberg Manor in 2000. And after 3 years, one team couldn't fulfill the requests that were asked for. Everybody wanted to see the dog, and it's not possible. So Ada Khan, head of volunteers, said she would support and help as much as she possibly could if I would start a therapy dog program. So Ada deserves multiple kudos for the success of Manassas Therapy Dogs. She's wonderful. She was a wonderful lady. I'm not lost track of her now. I bought every book on therapy dogs I could find, and there weren't many in those days. And I called Billy Smith asking her questions in Wyoming. And unfortunately, there was no format, no plan, no pattern for a therapy dogs organization to start. So all I had to go on was remembering the loose group of therapy dog teams that I had joined in Florida for visits. Members there went their own ways, some together and some alone, and then they'd meet together a couple times a week for a social. So fortunately, I was chosen to be a teammate, or she chose me, Bunny, a lady named Bunny, and she became my mentor. She was retired head of volunteers at Mount Sinai Hospital Complex in Miami, and she knew everyone in the medical industry. And I was so lucky because she asked me, come on, let's visit. I can't drive, but you can drive, and I'll take my dog with you and introduce you. So that worked really well. Her training and her introductions were superb. And little did I know at that point that this would be the foundation of an organization for therapy dogs in Manassas, Virginia. We needed everything, a tester, a location, but most of all, we needed teams. And that called for getting the word out to the community. So Ada called in the press for photos and articles in both the local newspapers and in the Washington Post. The information went out to everyone that a therapy dog program was being organized. But of course, we still were faced with most people in the community having no idea what a therapy dog team was. But some of the owners of dogs read the dog notices, and some of them indicated an interest in learning more about it. So Annenberg Manor provided space for testing, meetings, and much more. However, there still was no tester. I had taken the test, but in those days it took 2, 3, 4 months to hear back from the main office. So we were still without a tester. Since there were still a few people who were really interested in learning more about it, I called Sally Petty in Sperryville, which most of you know Sally. She came all the way from Sperryville for the test and all the observations for us. So our therapy dogs organization got started with those few. Well, therapy dog members Tammy Wood and Bonnie Musto both came to me and And they decided to organize a therapy dog group in North Carolina where they had moved. And they asked me for the format I used in organizing Manassas Therapy Dogs. But as you've just heard me say, I had no format, I had no plan, and I had nothing I could share with them except what we had done as a group. So evolvement is what I call Manassas Therapy Dog. It developed. To develop or achieve gradually or to undergo gradual change, and that's what Manassas Therapy Dogs was. It was step by step. New members came in with new talents, new ideas, and new activities. So the therapy dog members, Tammy Wood and Bonnie Musso, each decided to organize. They decided to go ahead and organize, and I told them as much as I knew about what to do and shared what little I had to go with them. Anyway, Manassas Therapy Dog started off with a bang. 9 members passed the test, yay. And then January 2004, 6 months later, there wasn't anything. Nobody would visit unless I called them and asked them, would you meet me there and come? And many of them had never made a visit. So I was kind of disappointed a little bit. And I was about ready to call it quits because I thought, well, it's a failure. And Gretchen Day and Sandy Anastasia called and asked me if I'd test them. And I said, what had happened I said, nobody's visiting, and I'm not going to test anyone who won't make a commitment to visit. And so that became a requirement for Manassas Therapy Dogs. You make a commitment to the organization. So both said they'd not only make their visits, but they would also help with the organization if I would get it going. So began the real growth of Manassas Therapy Dogs. And this small group of teams, and Teresa and I were talking about this, such a close-knit group of people, called ourselves Therapy Dogs, Inc. members, which we were, the national organization. We all visited together, all at the same time, and in Annenberg Manor, which was our only location. And we just had lots of fun working together and visiting together and knowing each other. And this was a world before all of your wonderful use of computers and the ability to exchange information back and forth. So we had to make telephone calls to, hey, can you do this or can you do that, or will you meet me over here and we can talk. And I could type and could use my computer to start a one-page newsletter that consisted of where we were going to visit the next week or two. And it went by snail mail over there. And lo and behold, a couple joined our group. Tom and Lola Counts joined our group. He was an IT expert, and he sent out a newsletter. He did pictures in the newsletter, a real newsletter. So it was really fun to see something really develop. So this is when I say that each member came in with their talents. Our biggest early endeavor was a parade in Annenberg Manor, and each one of the teams chose a picture, chose a song, and they dressed as the song said. So the Phantom of the Opera, the Black Lab wore a cape and a mask. And the Come to the Circus, we wore a circus uniform, and our dog did tricks. And then some of them were singing in the rain and wore raincoats and an umbrella. And we had a wagon train playing, and so they dressed in cowboy accent. Yeah, thank you. It wouldn't come out. Anyway, dressed as pioneers. Then the dog Cleo wore a rustic old bag around her waist to carry all of the belongings when they were going on. And so this gives you a little picture of what we did. It was so much work and so much fun, and the residents just loved it. We would walk around while our song played, and we would visit with each one of the members of the public, and it was a lot of fun. The word and a bit of knowledge about therapy dogs began to spread around, and people began to know a little bit more about it, and the guy became a little more interested. There were about 10 committed therapy dog teams by the end of 2004. It was exciting because all of a sudden, as I said, they were beginning to hear about us and know about us, and the head of the Prince William Hospital started coming over and watching us and seeing what we're doing when we're testing or when we visit. And he said, we want you in the hospital. And that's how we got into the hospital. He was so impressed with what he had seen with our therapy dogs. On the first visit to the hospital, I went up to the second floor, and many of you who've worked there know where that is. And I was met with, get that dog out of here. What do you mean bringing a dog up here? Dogs belong outside in the yard and definitely not in this hospital. This was the volunteer who was in charge of the floor, and this was her domain, and she didn't want anything to bother her area. So diplomacy was the key. So I suggested that she accompany me to each of the rooms, because she wouldn't have let me go on my own anyway, and let me know what she thought afterwards. So she went with me, each one, and we got back, and I said, okay, what do you think? She said, oh, I've never seen the patients smile so much, and she became our biggest champion of therapy dogs. So actually, she was a character that we all just loved. She worked as a volunteer until she was 99, and she died a little after 100. So, but we absolutely adored her. She was a character, but dogs didn't. That was Betty.
Betty?
Yeah, Betty. And I tried to remember her last name. I couldn't remember the last name. Sorry. If I think of it, I'll let you know. Okay. The therapy dog group joined the Manassas Therapy Dog for the first time parade, the Christmas parade, for the first time in December 2004. The parade that day was really scary. It was delayed by 2 hours. It was 15 above zero, freezing rain, and we were placed in between two high school bands playing ear-splitting music. The little dogs would go back and forth to the car because we didn't know when we were going to start. So they would go back and forth to the cars to get warm and come back again. And the big dogs were so sweet. They just, in fact, all of them everybody was just real trooper. And one of our members, Estelle, with her tiny poodle named Sugar, if you all remember Estelle, 82 years old, had recently had 2 hips replaced. She stayed outside with us the whole time with her little dog snuggled up under her. She walked all the way from the shopping center, past the pavilion and back, because in those days we didn't have a ride back. You had to walk back. But she did all of that. Was the biggest trooper ever. Great. Testing continued as the prospects came, and some of them tested and we never saw them again because it was another certification for their dogs. So we had to learn to deal with a lot of different type of things. But we've had more and more facilities who were interested, and the number of visits did grow from the one nursing homes to the hospital, and of course some of the people had programs near them that they started participating in, which was what we encouraged. And it was time then for us to organize and have a recognizable name other than the national name. So members who were either leading a program or willing to lead a program became the board of directors, if you will. As I recall, it was Bill and Greta, Karen, Lola, Tom, Frank, and I know there are others. If I forget names, y'all bear with me. It's been a long time ago. You get my age, you forget a lot of things. We did not write a formal constitution because we were just a small organization getting started, but we did put down all of the responsibility of the organization in each area. And each area was down in this list, and it was the equivalent of if a larger organization that was better organized. It was their equivalent of their constitution. So we also wrote bylaws, and each one of us submitted them, and we all decided what was the best. And then over the years, they were altered, deleted, revised as we grew into a larger organization covering more areas. Manassas Therapy Dogs was chosen as the name because it was a recognizable name throughout the community. Everywhere in Prince William County knows Manassas, so that recognized us as that community. Sherry, excuse me. Most of after we had been organized about 4 years, about 2007, and pardon me if I forget it may be a year off, but something in that time, we had active, interested members who worked together really, really well. And we would, it would be in little groups that worked together, went together, but we would also all have a big group that we visit regularly together. There was Teresa and Frank and Carolyn and Jean and Paula and Louise and Deb, and I know that there's bunches of you. I just can't, haven't written them all down. But some of the names are over there on the quilt. If you look at the quilt, some of the names are over there. One of the events that we enjoyed most was our trick shows, and most of us were into tricks training. There was some that just did high fives, and others performed professional tricks. And it took a lot of time, and they trained, and some were actually in trick competitions. So we would go to different facilities and have trick shows, which was fun. Then you remember that, Bill, and had a good time with that. Anyway, we had a huge celebration on our 5th anniversary at the Manassas Pavilion. We brought in busloads of people from the nursing homes and to watch us, and there were a lot of photos in one of the albums over there of that event, because they were doing tricks and they were doing all kinds of parades and everything through there. The next thing we went into was education, and the education at first was about therapy dogs and their work. The more exposure that we had, the more education for the public, and the more therapy dog handlers needed information. Even the potential members who really were excited about being tested wanted to know more details. They wanted to know, what do you do when you get there? How do I handle this, or how do I handle that? So we began having meetings and this developed into this information meeting that we had before we tested, before testing. But when it first started, we invited the public, and a lot of people from the public would like to come and just ask questions, because they were curious about what you were doing coming into facilities, medical facilities. Excuse me. But one of the things that we had to do in the early years, and all of you who were part of that, remember it, we had to sell ourselves. We couldn't just walk in and say, we're visiting today, or can we visit? It was, we'd made portfolios, and we would put our background, and we would put our rules and regulations. We would get what we did when we tested. We had all this information, and we would hand them a little portfolio to the head of the facility so they could see that we were qualified, and they would read it, and some would reject us and some would accept us, but we had to sell ourselves. It was just knocking on doors, so to speak. But then it started, they started hearing more positive things at that point. So Manassas Therapy Dog members had a lot to learn, had a lot to teach, and a lot to share. And we, excuse me, a dedicated group that we just loved. Everybody just loved what they were doing, and I think that was the biggest thing that we had. Sally Petty had started a therapy dog program about the same time that I started our program here. And she and I shared ideas for programs. We used to meet for lunch a lot of times to talk over ideas for the therapy dog organization. And if an opportunity arose that more teams were needed for an area, she'd call me or I'd call her that we needed some teams to visit at a certain location. One of those opportunities that came along was joining her teams at the burn camp for children. It was a really long drive, but that experience is still the #1 highlight of my therapy dog experience. The first year, only 2 teams went, Gretchen Day with her Bisla and I with my Corgi. The children were so scarred from burns on their faces, their hands, their limbs. Our hearts were just totally broken. I bring tears to my eyes today. It's hard to talk about it. John knows when I talk about it. It was so shocking. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get out of the car and work with them because I was so shocked at how scarred they were. And a little boy came up to my car, and he wanted me to open the door, and I did, and he wanted me to get out so he could pet my dog. His hands were mostly burned off, his ears were burned off, his whole face was just total scarred. He'd been burned so badly. He was the sweetest, most wonderful little kid ever. And he taught me that life goes on as it is. You ignore your burns and you go on. A true lesson for all of our lives, and I think it taught me a big one. We had great experiences and lessons. One that was amusing was a little girl who was absolutely terrified of dogs, absolutely refused to come near a dog. And she saw all the children crowding around Remy. And she said, "What's his dog? What's your dog's name?" And Gretchen said, "My dog's name is Rembrandt. I call him Remy." And the little girl said, "Like the toothpaste, Rembrandt?" She said, "Yeah, just like the toothpaste, Rembrandt." And he said, "Oh, well, if a dog is named Rembrandt, he must not be too bad." So she went over and petted the dog because it was an okay name. It was one she knew. So it was just a fun experience to have. Greta and Bill continued visiting burn camp for years afterwards until Sally had so many teams she didn't need anymore, and so we quit joining her at that point. Another program that we began when Sally told me about a new reading program that she had investigated and would like to start it in the schools near her. So this was a great opportunity to also start a reading program in our group. So Sally and I both joined Intermountain Therapy Dogs organization and used these credentials to begin the reading program. It's a breeze if you want to join today. You just send in your money and proof of being a certified therapy dog team, and you're accepted. But it certainly wasn't a breeze when we joined. We were set a volume about that thick that we had to read and learn and take a test before we would be accepted into the program. But you know what? It was worthwhile because it gave me credentials. I can say, "Hey, I'm a member of this I'm a member of this reading program," and the credentials. And so it was really worthwhile to just spend that time to do it. Lola Counts was actually the one who began the reading program, and she's the one who gave it Pause for Reading name. Lola, Wendy Benke, Bill and Greta Peary took the leadership in different schools once it was established. The first sessions began at Bull Run Library. Then Wendy got us into Hayden Elementary, where her son attended. I provided the credentials from the Intermountain Reading Program and participated with them, but the others did all the work of setting it up and leading it. Along with the reading program came the responsibility that students participating and those who just attended school needed safety rules around dogs because they would just run up and grab them, and I'm sure y'all still have that experience. They just run up and grab, and you had to teach. It was time to teach the kids how to approach a dog. So we set up this program to teach children how to approach a dog safely, no matter whether it was our therapy dogs or whether it was a dog on the street. So we had some programs. I brought a few of the books that are left from that program that are back there. If you have a few that are left, you're welcome to have one. In addition, she and Paula and I were working at Hayden Elementary School together. We decided that we would visit every child in the school, teach them not only how to approach the dog, but tell them and explain that when they see the dogs in the hallway, they're not to leave their group and come and pet our dogs. And it provided some discipline in the schools, which the school really appreciated because they were trying to keep the kids organized, and there was a dog, hey, they wanted to go touch them. So the opportunities and successes of Manassas Therapy Dogs are all part of a larger vision. There's a vision that began in 1990 with the start of Therapy Dogs Incorporated, the name you know as Alliance of Therapy Dogs. As Manassas Therapy Dogs grew, we remained on probation by the national organization. ATD was very skeptical of us as a therapy group, local therapy dog group. They're afraid that we were going to be competing with them or doing something that we shouldn't do. So they were very skeptical of us. And so it's still really important to realize that they are the primary organization. They're the national organization. And we are just a small part of it. There are, over 15,000 members now or something like that. So our group is just a small part of it. But they make it possible to have insurance, guide rules. They teach us all of these things and appreciate the fact that the national organization is there for you. And that's one reason why we have a therapy dog group here in Manassas. So this is how a successful organization evolved. It's through a lot of hard work. It was through a love of helping others, a desire to share our four-legged best friends with those who needed them. And today it's really easy for you to get involved. You just express an interest in being tested, get certified, and just everybody wants you to come and visit. So you have multiple areas to visit, multiple facilities. They'll welcome you with open arms. So you have a group of testers. I don't know how many you have today, but we had about 4 or 5 when I left 3 years ago. I guess y'all still test once a month, and once a month? No? Okay.
Once every 3 months.
Okay, but you can get tested fairly easily if you want to.
We have a new tester that's over in Fairfax now, so she helps with a lot of that.
Oh, okay.
Side, so we don't have the bulk that we used to have.
Yes, yeah.
So we still have, I would say, anything from 4 to 6 people normally, right?
Fantastic. That's great. Yes, because you're still growing. That's the important thing. And whether or not they're still visiting, and that's the important thing. Well, today you're a certified team, not just registered. We were just registered. That just came about 5 years ago. The national organization is called Alliance of Therapy Dogs today, and we had a little hard time getting used to the change of that. There will always be challenges and changes. You will find that every year, every month, every week, every day, there are going to be changes to the organization. Looking back, it was an exciting time. We developed a program from scratch, so to speak. We fixed the glitches as they developed, new ideas to try, sometimes winning and sometimes losing. But most of all was the joy in spreading a friendly visit from a sweet four-legged critter to those in the community around us who needed us. And every new program, every new activity, and every opportunity evolved throughout the whole years. You Manassas Therapy Dog members have a responsibility, and that responsibility is to keep the Manassas Therapy Dogs organization alive and well and keep it evolving. Take pleasure and be thankful for the opportunity and the privilege that you inherited to work with your four-legged partner to give love, smiles, and warmth, and serve in so many areas that are people in need.